Welcome to the Rocks and Oceans podcast, where you'll learn all about living in healthy masculine and feminine balance. We're your hosts, Jamel Harris and Alex Golden. And we made all the relationship mistakes before, so you don't have to.
Fun, connection, abundance, and a whole lot of sexy time will become your daily reality when you choose to step into an aligned way of knowing yourself. No worries if you feel salty and cynical from heartbreak. That's often the most powerful starting point for transformation. Welcome, and we're about to have so much fun together.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the show.
Hello, everybody. So glad you're here.
I know, right? We, as always, we want to bring y'all some real shit today, right?
hot off the life press.
Yeah, for real. So we were sitting back in the room. We were talking. We was like, man, let's go hop on right now. Normally we record these later in the evening, but today it is 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And the reason we're here now is because the topic was so good. We were obviously we both have social media. We both have Instagram. So we were scrolling, and I don't know who sent it to me, but one of my friends sent me a video, and it was a video of this guy. He was in the car. You guys may have seen it, but I guess him and the wife are mad. And y'all know when a wife is mad, let's say the guy's driving, just kind of set it up, they're driving. You got into an argument in the house, and you're driving in the car, and your wife, she's just looking either straight ahead or she's looking straight out the window. Now, normally, she turns a little bit towards you. She's facing you, her little knees facing your way. But you know when she's mad, she looking straight ahead. She ain't looking at you. She looking out that window. I don't know what's out that window, but they just get fixated out that window. So in this video, this guy, they're in this scenario, right? And if you're in a relationship, you know what I'm talking about. So they're driving, and as guys, normally when times are good, you'll put your hand on your lady's leg or whatnot, right? So the guy, he's driving his wife, she's looking out the window, and he has his hand on her leg, and just the way she's intensely looking out the window, he kind of pulls it back to himself, like, oh shit, I don't know if I should even put my hand on her leg. And she just kind of grabs it and she puts it back on her leg. And then we actually had kind of a situation like that.
The caption was when you're mad at each other, but she still loves you, or something like that. Or it was like when you guys are fighting, but she still loves you.
Yeah.
And so that was the thing, and it was very on topic.
That's how we got the meme. So I sent it to Alex. I was like, man, this was us this weekend. Because we want this podcast to be something real. We've both been in relationships for a long time. I was married 17 years. She was too. We both went through a divorce. So obviously we feel like we didn't know what we were doing in that space and we wouldn't be divorced. But now we feel like we have a good relationship, a great relationship. I shouldn't say that. So this podcast is about us taking our real life and just telling y'all what the hell happened. So
yep.
It started with that meme. So like I said, the guy put his hand on the lady's leg, and she was looking intently out the window. And fellas, y'all know what I'm talking about. I was like, man, dude, she even want me to touch her. Mm-hmm. And he pulled it back to his side of the car, and she grabbed his hand and she put it back on her leg. And that's what we wanted to talk about today is, even though you're mad at each other, you still love each other. So you want anything to that, babe?
Yeah, absolutely. That meme, I guess I don't totally remember the order if we saw it I guess we saw it after.
Yeah, it was after.
But it was a weekend where, I mean, the story isn't all that like exciting in terms of what it was, but it was just one of an example that we've been talking about it leading up to in other episodes, but sometimes the feminine has, with the awareness that she brings, ends up getting a perspective or has a response to the information that she's getting. And it might be physical information, like what's really happening. It might be more of like a feeling or an energy, like this is the vibe and there seems to be something coming or not or whatever. And it was just one of those examples where I was bringing something up that you didn't necessarily want to hear about. Like, it wasn't a problem that you were excited to unpack and discuss. Or even just like, I suppose a way to say you hadn't really gotten to an acceptance point of like even having to deal with it. So me bringing it up and pointing out to you and getting in my feels about what I was seeing and what I was picking up on, then got us into, essentially a day and a half long thing. I mean, it was probably like a day, but it kind of had some spillover. So I guess, and that's where in those scenarios, when you are discovering that you have a problem, like we started with just like a regular conversation, and I knew it was a dicey topic. Like, as in I started it with my usual, what did you say, sandwich method?
Yeah, she has a sandwich method. So what she'll say is, in the ladies, they know what I'm talking about. They have to do that for us guys because they know right away we start processing and internalizing, which is not good. We have to be present first of all, fellas. And so she was bringing something up, and right away it was not something I wanted to hear because the boys were all here. We were like watching the game, like it was football. It was Saturday.
Yeah, it was Saturday.
It was Saturday. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
It was just beautiful. The sun was outside. It was shining. Football was on. Did I grill that day?
No, that was Sunday.
No. Okay. It was just a beautiful day. It was not a day for that discussion, is what my brain was thinking. I had this whole plan about we was going to have this great day, and it just didn't go that way, which was part of the problem is I was not flexible in how the day was going to go, which is the Rocks in the Oceans podcast, right, fellas? So let me tell you what that means.
Terminator-y on the rock aspect.
Yeah, man. The ocean going to do what it's going to do. Shout out, blessings to the people dealing with the hurricane and stuff like that. Like a lot of people are going through stuff. So we don't want to be insensitive. There's a lot of people going through a lot. So, prayers and, thoughts to the families going through that.
Yeah.
But based on our podcast is Rocks and Oceans. And it's based on, if you've ever seen like that rock over in like Norway or something, that waves are crashing all upon it, that rock stays still. And with us, that's what was happening is the rock was trying to chill, but the ocean started oceaning when I wasn't ready for it. Right?
Yep.
But that doesn't matter, fellas. Like once the ocean. Hey, if y'all ever seen people trying to get on those certain kind of rocks in the middle of the ocean, they get their ass knocked over. I'm across like danger here. It's like so I digress. But my point is, I was not ready for the ocean. I didn't want to swim that day.
To be totally honest, I'm not sure any day would have been super fun for you to discuss that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like really at the end of the day, because I have done that run around where I was like, oh, shoot, I didn't time it right. And then it's like, well, when you're fighting and you bring it up, then you're dumping on and you're bringing up old stuff. If you're waiting when things are good, then you're ruining the day. So really, there is often never an actual good time to have uncomfortable discussions on topics that we don't want to acknowledge.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, so that was, looking back to pull it apart, you were saying you didn't necessarily have the flexibility of thought for accounting on like what I'm not trying to find things in my awareness that cause problems. And I don't think most feminines are. Now, are there problematic people? Yes, but this isn't the podcast for them. When we're not necessarily trying to, but it was just one of those things where what it looked like to me in the situation going on was glaringly obvious. It would have been like me walking past like a hole in our ceiling and being like, we don't need to patch that up this weekend. It is all good. Like, like
I'm
that.
watching the game, man. Forget that hole.
Right. And I think the problem is that men or masculines are thinking more, if there's an actual hole, it's a physical problem. But when the feminine, I'm not sure I set it up as the energetic hole in the beginning. Like, yes, I was sort of meeting you where you were at in terms of being like, I know this is a hard discussion. I'm trying to intro it gently. I understand that this is a little challenging. but I think where because I was like, man, this is tough. Like this sucks to deal with it too. I I probably could have taken a little more time to process my own feelings around it. But on the flip side, you and I have talked about we want to get that time to resolution down. And so that's where I kind of made the game day decision. Like, I'm going to just say it and just go do it. It wasn't a good call. I probably should have just, thought through it and chilled out the ocean on my own some more before approaching. But on the other hand, I think we learned some good stuff that we're going to share about today. And so it's not like I feel like I messed up, but on, really thinking about it, probably it was too sensitive of a topic. Like, as in I could have just waited for my own emotions to be more calm on it and then brought it up. Even if though I was making all the points that I don't know that my energy was coming across very like chill about it, because I wasn't. I mean, it wasn't a lie, but I could have been more intentional about like getting me better and then bringing it up.
Yeah. I appreciate you saying that, babe. One of the things is that I want to say is we talked about in another episode about the deposits. You have a lot of deposits with me. So when you're bringing something up, I don't right away take it personal because we have a good relationship. So a lot of this stuff is prefaced on you are on good footing before things come up, if that makes sense. And so when you brought that to me, it was a sensitive subject. And looking back on it, in the moment, I didn't think about the sensitivity of it and the timing of it. But that's exactly what it was that bothered me. I was like, this ain't the time to be bringing this up. Like, this is a conversation for you when, at the end of the night, when we're in bed, because the kids were around. And I was like, that's probably what I was feeling, was like, why are you bringing this up right now? Mm-hmm. And so I appreciate you saying that, and that's a learning moment for both of us right here on the podcast. So,
no, it's true, because normally when I walk around with, a weirder energy from my normal, you want to know what, like you want to talk about it because you want to know what's up, right? On the flip side, that probably was the time for me to say, I know what's up, and from this, I'm not bringing it up until it's time to bring it up, and it's a good time to bring it up, and that's where I just have to make the call, right? Like, I made the call the other way because I was like, I know we're trying to shorten the time, and can I just like, let him know what I'm thinking about it? But I inadvertently ended up dropping a grenade into our experience in the weekend. Though that wasn't my intention, it still sort of had that effect. So I think that's where, was it true? Yes. Was I correct on the, like, thinking and the fact that I needed to bring it up? Absolutely. But I think it was just probably too heavy to work on, like, connection on top of that. And I just didn't know. I honestly didn't know how you would respond. I knew it was sensitive, but we had been communicating so well, and I just was like, maybe we are at the stage where we can talk about, something like this, like on in real time. And I think that's where we are like, that wasn't, it's not necessarily wrong, but it wasn't the right thing either.
Yeah, and to be fair, like, I'm not sitting here saying the game is more important than your feelings. We're just talking about timing of certain discussions. So we're not sitting here. We've talked about this on other podcasts. The game is not more important than what she's feeling, because to be honest, you didn't drop the grenade. It was just something that happened that both of us were responding to.
Yeah.
But I didn't like the comment that you made in response to what had just happened. And like we said, it was the timing of it that kind of was bad. And so, yeah, I did not think about that. So that's good. And so what you guys are seeing in real time is this is how we talk all the time. Is like we literally talk like this about what happened, how can we improve it. And so, Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, totally.
Hearing about
And
right
when
now.
you debrief like this, it's nice because next time I can literally say, "Babe, I'm not sharing something with you, but we already had the conversation. We learned that lesson last time. It's one of these things that I think." And honestly, whenever we do that, it's almost never a problem. Because almost by the time we've had that discussion, both of us are like very cautious with how we respond, right? And we take the time to respond well. But because it was off the cuff and it was in real time and I was just like straight sharing what I was feeling, we were not prepared for it. So that's where having the conversation often does protect you from any future BS because, right, if I ever come and be like, it's one of those, remember how we, lost part of a weekend, you're going to come to it differently. Right. And that's where I think we can always learn from anything that happens. And it's good to talk about it. And I'm having some ahas on like, I think my thinking was just like the more I can bring and the more like in real time I can bring it, the better. But now I'm sort of like modifying it in terms of, yes, that is overarchingly true, but sometimes you're not going to make that call. Like, your person better than that.
Honestly, as you're talking, and for me, it was a lapse of consciousness and presence. It's like one of the things that I coach, my clients on is your consciousness and your presence. And so what I mean by that is I'm so focused on the game that I was not present with you.
Yes, but also part of it, I don't even really, to me, it didn't seem like the game. It was that the topic was triggering enough that it was hard to think about.
I guess maybe the game was easier to focus on.
Right, yeah, the game had no problems.
But at any rate, just a little coaching for the guys. If in that moment, yes, I'm watching the game, if I could have been more present, I could have said, hey, babe, this ain't a good time to talk about this right now. Let's talk about this later tonight. We're watching the game. The kids are here, blah, 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 blah. But and it wasn't like nothing crazy in front of the kids. I want to make sure y'all don't hear that. But
yeah, I mean,
it was just something that it just changed the energy of the moment.
Yeah.
If that's a good way to say it.
Yeah, like we're being polite, and that's kind of why we're talking about this topic, is it? There's not any screaming or yelling or rudeness or anything like that, but it does change the vibe of the house.
We weren't cutting each other down. Like the kids probably didn't even notice anything. We just noticed each other's energy.
It's true. We do have some sensitive energy kids. I feel like they read the vibe real hard. So, being aware of that, we are aware that they are aware. It's like vulnerable. Do you know what I mean? And so it was just another thing to take into account, really. But yeah, that part. But anywho, so that was our part of starting it. But then when we were really sort of in the conversation, all this stuff, it really came down to you didn't want to have the conversation, but you also hadn't necessarily had the awareness of you didn't know you didn't want to have the conversation. So we were in a bit of a push and pull where I was like, he keeps asking me what I think, and I'm like, I don't even think we agree on the problems. Plus, I don't know that you're trying to talk about it. And you're like, just tell me what you want different so that this wraps up. And I'm like, I can't do that. So we were really in like a loop with it. And because we were in a loop, that's where the time sort of dragged out. And that's where we had many opportunities to decide how we were going to act while in the process of like my feelings kept getting hurt because I'm like, I don't think he wants to hear about this. I wish we could just stop talking about it. And I think you were feeling frustrated because you're like, I'm not even really trying to get into this, but I'm trying to resolve it.
To be fair, I was in chill mode. I'd had a couple glasses of wine. Right. And I was like, man, I am not trying to hear this shit right now. Like,
but you weren't saying that.
I didn't say that, but I was like, man, I don't want to hear this. Like, we supposed to be watching football. We drinking wine. We on chill mode. Like, we worked all week. Like, I'm off right now. Why are you Why are you doing this right now?
Yeah. How could you do this to me?
Why are we doing this right now? That's how we feel. Like, man, she always brings shit up at inopportune times. But that's not really it. It was really something that needed to be addressed, and that's part of masculinity. You can't just turn a blind eye to certain things that need to be addressed.
Yeah.
And so what she was doing as my partner, she was like, hey, we really need to address this. But
Right, because if I
really
do it during the week, then I'm ruining your work time and distracting you, right? And then if it's the week, that's exactly right. So do not fall for it, feminine. Do not fall for it. It is absolutely a lie, and you will waste years of your time. I've been there.
Just get your sandwich out. I didn't even tell them what the sandwich was. So you kiss them, kick them, kiss them. So what that means is you say something really nice. So she'll be like, Jay, you're awesome. You're an amazing man. I really appreciate what I'm like. Oh shit, it's coming. And then she'll say what I need to work on. She doesn't say it in a negative way, but she was like, I don't like how you handle that. Blah 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 blah. But then she'll kiss it again. She'll say, but you're still awesome. You're amazing. If we could just work on this one thing, we'll be awesome. And so that is a great technique for communicating with the masculine. It's like build them up, tell them what they need to work on, and build them back up. Mm-hmm. Don't just tear them down.
Yeah, totally. Because that's part when, back to the topic at hand, was just being loving even when there's shit going on. That was the whole thing, is that I knew it was going to be a sensitive subject. So I'm bringing it up in a way that wants to highlight like more focusing on the improvements, because I think essentially what I think most masculines struggle with and what feminines then struggle with is you're trying to bring things up for improvement, and they're like, you say I'm stuck, I'm so offended, I need to be defensive about this. And it's like, well, how do we help the family and our situation improve if you can't talk about where the areas for improvements start?
Girl, you said something.
Mm-hmm.
That might need to be a little clip.
Right? And so that's where it is. I mean, I guess I just don't know, from a wounded masculine place, like for anything that happens to the masculine, it's always going to undercut that. So that's where I don't know how else to do it than to overshoot the acknowledgement of what happens. Now, I don't know how much it helped this weekend. Like, as in, even though I had put in there how I saw you, that wasn't the I mean, we didn't really have the real conversation of like me making my point and you being like, oh, right, that's a good point. We could, X, Y, Z, till Sunday.
Right.
But that's where I think it's better to overshoot, but also you ultimately, the feminines, you are not responsible for that. You can't take responsibility for that. So, I mean, in some ways, that's more just you're just watching to be like, who is the man, right? Like, that's your time to look and to be aware and to be like, who am I dealing with? Now, if you're already married and when you're in it, cool, okay, you don't even, you're asking that with a different purpose, to understand them, to meet them where they're at. But if you are dating, that is absolutely the time to be like, do I want this, right? Because honestly, that's what you're going to deal with it your whole life then. He's going to lead like that all the time, right? Unless there's change. And so you really are, it's unpleasant. But on the flip side, that's literally what a feminine is assessing for. And of course, the flip side is also true. How you are acting, they're watching you on that. So it's like, it's fair enough. But on the feminines, I think that's where you really have to decide, what are you hearing for? Because if you're married, acting like you're dating and thinking those thoughts, you're, quickly on your way to divorce. So if you're not meaning to end up in divorce, you are looking, but you're just making sure that you're keeping your mind right.
Absolutely. And to your point, that maybe it's not your point, but our relationship is each person in the relationship has a role, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you're the feminine, I'm the masculine. Her role, I like to call her the oracle. Like, the feminine just feels certain things that we don't feel because we're logical. They're emotional, right? So she feels things ladies, y'all know this, and fellas, they feel bad energy of a person way before you do. They be like, baby, I wouldn't hang out with him. You're like, no, he cool, he cool. Next thing you know, this joke acting a fool.
Yeah,
Like,
stabs you
"Daggone,
in the
baby,
back.
how'd you know that, right? So the thing that I've learned about masculinity and femininity, we have roles. Like mine is like leadership, decision making. Hers is the feeling, the emotion. She sees things before I see them. So I've learned to take that into account. Now, at the end of the day, I'm gonna make my own decision, but I have learned to take into account the information that she's had because a lot of times she's right. So I said all that to say the issue that she brought up, my ass know I need to deal with it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying, fellas? We know we need to deal with it. Whatever your feminine's bringing up, you know you need to deal with it. You just don't want to hear that shit right now. That's what it was. So you're being an oracle. You were doing your job. I just didn't want you to do it right then. So you weren't wrong in what you were doing. It just was the timing of it. And again, but I could have did better of being more present. Like, you know what, she is right. I shouldn't be tripping about this. This really just happened. I'm just trying to ignore it and watch the game because I didn't want to deal with it. In that moment. I was going to deal with it later, but it was one of those things that it really needed to be dealt with right at that moment. And so I just want you guys to understand that when the feminine is bringing something up, is probably a good idea to check into it, because she can feel certain things that the masculine can't feel. We're logical, get the job done, but the feminine, she feels things that we don't feel. And so she was not wrong in what she was bringing up. It just, for me, it was a quote unquote inopportune time. But again, if I'm in my masculine, I always have time for the feminine. If I don't, I can communicate with her and say, hey, baby, thank you for bringing that up. I can still be respectful, but let's talk about this tonight when we, get in the room. I'll be in a better space to hear you, to listen to everything you got to say. And then we can, it just would have been handled totally different.
Absolutely. And I think that's a fair point, is that now that I am thinking about it even closer in terms of like, why did I choose to bring it up then, is that often, we have the feeling of something's coming before it pops out into a real problem in the physical. And I think that's where, for the feminine, part of the responsibility you're taking for whether you say things, and how I just said, this time I feel like I got a lesson in waiting a little bit. But what I also have to acknowledge, that I'm taking on the responsibility for, if I miss the moment and something happens, I will know that it's on me to have made that decision. As in, I didn't alert the masculine to what I was picking up on, and now we are both going to be surprised by whatever happens. So that's an important thing, because the feminine has to, that's one of the responsibility that falls to us. But you also, when you're a masculine and you make the request for her to wait, you are also then participating in the responsibility of that, right? Like, if she can't come to you in the moment and then later you're like, why didn't you tell me? That's just not an argument I feel like is a valid one.
True story.
You really have, if you're having her wait because for an emotionally appropriate time for you, there may be things that happen in the physical in the meantime, right? And at that point, that's where both parties just have to take responsibility for that side, right? Because if it's because of me and I wanted to be more calm, that's all on me. But if I came to you and you said, no, wait, no longer the same.
And there's
I did
times
my part.
that I know this needs to be handled right now. And so this just goes back to what we kind of started this part of the conversation about. Excuse me. Sorry about that. But it's just about knowing your partner. So I know you, and I know when that energy is off just a little bit. And so, yeah, I like that.
Yeah, for sure. So ultimately, we ended up landing the conversation well in the morning, but when we were kind of bridging it back to the hand on the thigh, is what do you do in the meantime, right? Like, who are you going to be while you are beefing or arguing or fighting or whatever? Because at that moment, I think we were both feeling pretty hurt. Like by the time the evening rolled around and we were trying to do bedtimes and things like that, there was just a lot of feelings.
Absolutely. Meaning we weren't normally we'll like, pass each other. We may kiss each other. I may grab your booty. You may grab mine. Like we're just really, really touchy feely. But when you get into it, all that shit's gone. So when that stuff stops, because I'm paying attention and I'm present, I already know something's wrong. When she passed by me and don't kiss me or look at me a certain way, I already know something's wrong. Like I don't even have to ask. And this goes to paying attention to your woman, right? So I already knew something was up, and we was doing story time. She had a little attitude about that. But even through all of that, we still were like nice to each other. Like we weren't like touchy feely, but we weren't disrespectful. We didn't say any mean things. Like
We still made I think the difference is we were making the attempts to show the interest. For example, we were sitting on the couch and you put your arm around me and kind of like lean me towards you. Now, I was not in the energy to stay there.
right,
But I did lean back on you. I mean, it was maybe for like 15 seconds. We snuggle a little bit, and then I sat over. But that's exactly that thing. It's the
curved me, girl.
reassurance.
I ain't gonna curve my snuggle.
Well, it's not really curving because it's like you do it, and then you you can choose to go back. But we still initiate, as in you still invited me over. Like I want your energy over here. And I'm still making dinner. I'm still like, hey, do you need a refill on your drink? That kind of stuff. And I think that's where the feelings, it's like accept the feeling, modify the behavior, and I kind of treat myself like that is I can have whatever feeling I want to have, but the behavior is on me to decide if I want, like, do I want to be the person to act like that? Because I think part of what creates problems in kids is more seeing the shitty coping mechanisms. Like, for example, me making everybody dinner and then not fixing you a plate or something, or things like that.
You're modeling behavior. That's the thing that we're very conscious of what they see, right?
Right.
Because that's how you grow up and get in a bad relationship. That's what you saw growing up. You think that's love, right?
Exactly.
So it's important to model the right behavior. So we're conscious of, yeah, we're into it, but we want the kids to see what a healthy into it looks like. Like, you're not going to have a relationship where there's not challenges,
Right.
where there's not disagreements, or you not in a relationship. Like, that's a dictatorship. If one person's just making all the decisions and the other person can't say anything, that's not a relationship. A relationship is compromise, is going back and forth. And so it's important to understand that your kids are watching your interactions with your partner. So we want to be the type of people, you mentioned showing up. How do you show up in the world? We want to show up as people that have a healthy relationship, that yes, we do have disagreements, but we know how to handle it and come back together in a healthy way.
Right. Like even, we'd be in the room, quick interaction, going back out. Our room's just like a little off to the side in the house. It's like a little suite off to the side. But when we come back out, that's where we're still, the tone of voice is like calm and polite. Like, if anything, we're probably more polite, like more proper politeness.
Very proper.
But on the flip side, I would rather that's kind of what that looks like. And really from that interaction, right, see someone, a quick snuggle, and then there's nothing weird about that, right? Like, as in there's nothing, what you may feel like doing is smacking the hand and being like, don't touch me. But again, why would that be? Like, if you watched your son's wife treat him like that, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm going to be like, I'm going to have a handful of hair in my hand before I realize what I'm doing. Right, yeah, like, so to me, that's where it's a great question of what happens next. Now, that's where we had you can notice some changes. Like, one thing that I noticed was like, or that I notice in you when you feel very like more in your triggered places, you'll switch to I. Instead of saying we, you'll switch to I. So like I on Friday or it was on Saturday, we read the littles' story time before bedtime, and the you basically switch to, I'm gonna go read the boys' story, and in my head I really wanted, like, I got into my feels because I always go set up your chair and put the book out that we're gonna read, and part of me was just like, why is he switching to I? Like, we always do this together. Like, he's icing me out, basically. Like, I just was like, I feel rejected on the, like, something we always do together. But then that's where I had the choice. Was I going to go put the chair out and put the book on it or not? And like, I did. And then we circled back around, and I only later pointed it out because really what I was having in the conversation in my head is really comes down to like, but where is our family going? Like, what is happening in the house and stuff? Me modifying, not doing story time impacts a whole bunch of people. My just quietly doing what I normally do, and then later on being like, it hurts my feelings when, your wording changes when we're beefing. We had that conversation, no problem. You were like, didn't realize I was doing it. I'll pay attention to it next time. And that was it. So I think ultimately, like for the feminines, yes, we can get in our feels. Absolutely. So can the masculine. But then what, and really maybe this is for everybody. Cool feelings happen. What are we going to do next? Like, what's going to be the best thing, and what message are you going to send to your partner?
What you're talking about is really, really important because as you were talking, I think about you reap what you sow. Mm-hmm. Because that's that slippery slope. Because we know we read a story, we work together. Sometimes I'll get the chair, you'll get the chair, or you'll get the book and I'll get the chair. Mm-hmm. We just work together on story time. Just right. So in a partnership, the minute you see that partner not working with you, so let's say she didn't get the chair, she didn't get the book. Well, now, because she's in her fields, man, it's something I'm telling y'all right now. She in her fields, so she don't get the chair, she don't get the book.
Right, because I'm in my chair from the I.
Uh-huh. Okay. I said I didn't even realize I was saying I. Mm-hmm. You hear me? Mm-hmm. I didn't even realize I was doing it. So she's in her feels about something I don't even realize I'm doing. So now she don't get the chair, she don't get the book. Now I go in here and I'm like, this bitch didn't get the chair or the book. Okay, so she mad. Now I have a choice. Let's just say we going to bed. We have this little bean bag. We like to heat up and like put on. It's
like a rice pack, yeah.
Yeah, it's like the best ever. If you've never had a rice pack on anything sore.
Screw anything from the store. You buy a 5-pound bag of rice, you put it in an old pillowcase, you tie it off, and you microwave that shit for 4 minutes. You're welcome. Yeah, you're welcome. It solves all. The rice goes into every nooks and cranny. Anywho.
So yeah. We have this beanbag, and we know when it's time to go to bed, we get the beanbag, we share, like put on our back or whatever's hurting, you can just put it on there, and it just makes it feel better. So let's just say she didn't get the chair, she didn't get the book. If I'm in my head, if I'm not present, if I'm not conscious about making sure we have a good relationship as a masculine, I'm leading this. I could go back and be petty and say, I'm not getting the beanbag. Mm-hmm. Right? Because normally I heat the beanbag up every night.
Like, but you did.
Y'all listen to what I'm saying. I could be petty like, I ain't getting that fucking beanbag. Fuck her. She didn't get the chair. She didn't get the book. I ain't getting the beanbag. I could do that. Mm-hmm. But I'm conscious and I'm like, is this going to help our relationship? Again, these boys are watching. Is this going to help them look better at relationships or worse? That might be a good question. Is what I'm about to do going to make the relationships look better or worse? In my kids' eyes, right? Because they're watching. So I can make the decision not to get the beanbag, but I went and got the beanbag. And that's a conscious choice because, again, I'm mad. I've been watching. I drank some wine. I'm watching the game. This ain't the time to be having no real conversation. Like, it's bedtime. It's time to chill. It ain't time to be talking about no real stuff.
Y'all heard that, right? It was like before it was like a better time for bedtime, but then it was time for bed.
Uh-huh. You know, Stop telling on me. But anyway. So I go heat up the beanbag, and what that does is Me seeing her get the chair, it just saying, all right, we still good. Same thing with what we started with, the hand on the leg. It's just a signal that we still good. I know we into it right now, but we're still good. Me heating up the beanbag, I know we into it right now, but we're still good. And so you have to have those moments in your relationship to where, yeah, we into it, but you have to be able to show your partner that we still good. And too often than not, we reinforce that it's bad.
Right.
We don't get the chair. We don't get the book. We don't get the beanbag. We don't rub their feet or whatever you do, your little routine. Whenever you get off that routine, you're basically telling your partner you're not important. And that starts the deposits from the bank account.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sorry, not the deposit. That starts the withdrawals from the bank accounts. And we have to make deposits.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Because really, it's sort of like, if, yes, you're mad, and yes, but you have to ask, like, overall, what is the state of your relation? Because you can get in your feels, and at that moment, you might realize, oh my gosh, we do this every day, right? And that's an important thing to pay attention to. But if you have your wits about you, and you're like, this is a once in a blue moon thing, and we're good, then that's really where you're functioning from, right? Like that's where you're sort of, it's almost just protective, and it's so much easier because you're pre-deciding how you're going to see the relationship, so that when you're beefing, you're still like, but what do I want from this relationship? Because if I love them, what I'm seeing, any weird action that I'm seeing, really at the end of the day goes back to, I'm seeing your wounded little kid and you're seeing my wounded little kid. We are just adult looking little kids duking it out.
Big facts.
Right. So if I actually love my person, you and me, really, like, what does it really do for me to then do things that undercut the relationship, unless I'm on my way out? And in some ways, though, I feel like so often both feminines and masculines they'll act sort of like, they'll act more crazy and a little irrational when they're like comfortable in the relationship. Once things start going south, sometimes people start thinking more and more logically, especially the feminine. So sometimes it's a really good sign when you guys can both remember your values and think clearly and like do what's right by the relationship. But in some ways, we have to put a little asterisk warning sign here. I think the feminine is prone to, by the time she's got it down like that, and it's clear that she's always met with defensiveness or arguing or whatever when she brings stuff up, really, we do stuff like, I'm going to make dinner. I'm still going to give you the bigger portion. And then I'm going to go eat it, but I'm still going to have done my part. Because on the back end, we might be sitting there going, well, gosh, if I'm not with this man, I'd have, I wouldn't be spending money on the food that I just got, after I worked, and I wouldn't be dealing with the hassle of arguing, and I wouldn't have to deal with the time to make so much and do all these things. Really, that's where, in a very logical way, it logics you out of the relationship. Because be like, I am a solid woman who cooks even when I'm mad. That's a little dangerous, because really you can take that anywhere, and so can a masculine, right? And that's where you doing the right thing, you can always hang your hat on that, because even at the end of the day, if they're not doing right by you, it will keep you safe. It'll make sure that you have your wits about you to go, yeah, I'm a good person. I don't deserve this.
And what you're really describing is once the feminine goes logical, AKA you stepped into the masculine. Yeah. And unfortunately, what happens is when the feminine steps into the masculine, if you're in a relationship, most of the time that guy's going to flip into the feminine, meaning he's going to get emotional.
Well, right, because you were already not very much by the very nature of what was happening, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's a dicey move.
Flipped into the feminine, And so this is what we see a lot. Coaching people is the roles that flip, meaning the woman is more masculine than the man, and the man is more
Right.
feminine than
She,
the woman.
yeah, she went to work. She made the money. She made your meals. She made sure that she gave you the provider of the house portion. And then very quietly, she's going to be like, I don't need a masculine because this is way more hassle than, because the flip side is, yeah, the masculine like doesn't have another paycheck brought in, but when we're not around, then a lot of things aren't there.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, a lot of feminines make money today. So it's like the thing we hear a lot in our coaching practice is they have another kid. Like, this is another kid, or he's too sensitive. You hear a lot of women describe men as they're too sensitive. That just means you're being defensive.
Right, like you have to really wait for the right time and the right way, and you really got to kiss it up. And I'm just like, ain't nobody have time to be that exhaustive.
You're being mean to me.
Right.
You're mean to me. All those phrases are telling the feminine that you're not masculine. Meaning, I can't handle this ocean right now.
Right, because it's true, and you run the risk of, like, it is the kicking your feet on the edge of the couch, watching your game, getting the snacks that were brought to you. I mean, you gotta, like, that you described, yes, you are allowed to be a man enjoying shit in your own house, but if that's you all the time at the expense of somebody else taking care of shit, that's what you look like. I mean, there's no good way to spin that.
No, that's right.
Right, like there's a.
Is that what I look like?
No.
I'm curious. So.
You're still here.
I'm joking. I'm joking.
No, right, yeah. So it's like, of course that's true, but it always has to be taken into the big account. And the same thing, I would say the same thing is true if a masculine is trying to lead the feminine, he's working really hard and she's just blowing money, getting her hair and nails done, not paying attention to anything, not looking out for him, not oracling and being like, hey, that business partner that you recently, hooked up with, he just seems shady. You ain't doing any of that. You're also not necessary there. So it goes both ways. But I just think it's, I think masculines are often so relieved when the feminine gets quiet like that. And they're like, oh, good, she's thinking logically. Please, please, please make sure that she's thinking in values and not in leaving your ass, because that is also what it looks like. You don't know until you talk. Truly, because it looks me being the person that I'm proud to be is the case either way.
And I feel like that, babe, whenever I'm wondering, like, if you're quiet or something, I'm just going to ask. Shit, I know something's up. Like, that's just asinine to me to know, okay, we've been into it. I'm just going to let you go off in the room and sit by yourself. I'm just going to keep watching the game for 3 more hours.
Yeah.
That's stupid. Like,
yeah, there's things happening without you.
Like, you're digging your own grave by the minute, buddy.
It kind of, yes. And I would say, think the same thing is true for feminines. Even you may have a good point, but not making the meal, not putting the chair out, not reading the story time. I could have just sat quietly by myself. But what happened was, I really would have just been fueling that fire. I really just would have been being like, essentially it comes down to, at the end of the day, I know I let that man get me out of my character. And that's on me still. So that has nothing to do with it. And it's like, I still need to make sure that happens. And then I feel like that kind of thinking keeps the relationship good for everybody, because if you each take responsibility for what you can take responsibility for, it's hard to get really off track.
Like, really
almost
like that
impossible.
Word, like character. Like, what's your character like when you get into an argument? Like, do you go below the belt, or are you still the same way? I think that's important to maintain your character and integrity. Just because you're with this person don't mean you're licensed to cut them down, say negative things. And I think that's really, really important in a relationship, because that's the beginning of the end. When you start cutting them down and saying negative stuff, or you always do this, or you don't ever do that, when you use a lot of generalities, that's just tough because nobody does everything perfectly.
No.
Like that's what we talking about today is like we're good now, but we weren't good
Right.
24 hours ago, 36 hours ago, whatever it was, right? But we want to do the podcast to teach people how to do this because we didn't do it in our other relationships, and we feel like we've done a lot of work around it, like understanding masculine and feminine, how to communicate. That's the biggest thing. We're gonna say it every podcast. Communication is the biggest thing. That's what we're talking about. We communicated, although it wasn't perfect communication, it was still communication, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I feel like anything that happens along the way, it is worthwhile to address. Like, the one thing that we didn't share about the story yet was that essentially what had happened was that then by Sunday, it had turned into two problems. We had the original problem that I was pointing out that I wasn't blaming you for it. You were in agreement that it was like a thing that needed to be addressed, and we came up with things to do for that, and started that process. Then the second part was that my feelings were hurt about how our conversations had went on Saturday. And my oracle was essentially a little bit like, I don't want to bring stuff up, which I knew was a problem. Like, I'm not going to stop doing that. But really, I'm not trying to gaslight myself. I really was like, I'm not feeling like I don't want to do that. And that's a problem. So
and it was valid. Like I said, I was watching the quote unquote watching the game. That's why I keep saying that. And you kind of felt like I really wasn't wanting to deal with it. I wasn't hearing what you were saying, which I wasn't. So it was disrespectful, and we talked about it, and I apologize.
Totally. And so from dealing with it, we let the actual problem take precedence because we had a lot of conversations around the things that you were going to do to address the problem were kind of hard for you, which is why you were not wanting to talk about it in the first place, right? And
it was communication, guys. She was wanting me to. I'm already communicating with her. She's wanting me to do some more communication in addition to the damn communication I already done. I'm like, man, there's too much communicating this weekend. Anyway, I digress.
Right. I get that. That's hard. Shit is hard for me too. I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where we completely paused what I had to work on addressing my own feelings about the hurt enough where I could support you with what you were having a hard time with, because again, originally that was the problem. So why would I address the secondary problem I'm having first, right? So this is, again, the feminine has to ask, like, you may have a point, and so can the masculine. You have a point. But what's funny in relationship, you can be right and wrong at the same time. So it's like, yeah, you might be right, but it would have been wrong for me to flip it because something else needed to happen. And outside of a partnership, you found it difficult. You're in a partnership. Why the hell are you in one if it doesn't do you any good? Right? So for me then to leave you in the lurch and be like, well, deal with it because you hurt my feelings. Again, that just like doubles down on the fact that I'm pointing out the problem, finding a new problem, and then leaving you with the original problem. I'm not totally wrong, but I mean, how is that helping anybody? So it's like we had to first talk about that support, and that I had to make choices around how I showed up for that, because I'm not going to blow through all my own internal cues. That's just like a feminine thing that's respect for me. On the flip side, I went as far as I could possibly go without bumping into that. And as the day went on, I found it easier and easier. Actually, it sort of like healed the hurt to be supportive, because I saw you in, like, you were trying to do the right thing. You wanted to do the right thing. You were working towards that. We were just getting there.
I just had to calm down. I think in the moment I was too anchored to what my plan was, and anything that you were saying that wasn't part of that plan.
Well, it was
trying to hear it.
Not only was it your plan, but I think you were bothered by what I was bringing up, right? So it was also unpleasant on top of it. No one fucking wants to do that. I mean, who in their right mind? No one wants to do that shit. Like, of course. So I think that's where it actually helped, because watching that, you see, oh my gosh, this is so challenging. And, we got into why, and, what happened in your history that made that challenge, like all of it. And so, of course, by the end of all that, my own problem was smaller.
Yeah.
And then by the time we circled back around, it was like Sunday night, even by the time we even talked about like how my feelings were hurt. I was already way less upset. Mm-hmm. But two, I feel like, I don't know, that was like 15 minutes. And I made some requests on things that I would want in the future. And you were like, cool. And that was pretty much it.
I feel like we need to say not exactly what it is, but kind of what it is. There was a conversation that needed to be had with a certain person that I didn't want to have, because it was going to be an uncomfortable conversation. And I was like, man, I don't want to do that right now. And you were like, babe, you need to do it. And this is part of the relationship. I knew you were right. That's why I was fighting you. And so I'm just putting it out there, because she's seeing something that I didn't see because I was watching the game. But it still needed to be addressed, because this situation that she was talking about can affect our life. You know what I'm saying? If we don't address it. And it's the same thing for you guys out there. There's conversations that need to be had. There's things that need to be said, and we don't say them because of how we feel about ourselves or how we feel about what that person's going to think about us. Mm-hmm. And fellas, that's just masculinity. Like, I ended up, having a conversation. I didn't want to, but I felt better after it.
You
and
decided
it
on your own
to have other conversations.
I did not make you. Yeah.
No, you didn't make me. I did it on my own. I did it on my own because I knew I needed to do it. You just brought it up. You didn't try to force me to do it. Mm-hmm. You just said, I saw this. I'm seeing this. I feel like this needs to be addressed. You didn't even say I needed to address it. You just said, I just see this pattern, and I feel like we need to address it. And I just wasn't wanting to address it in that moment. Mm-hmm. But you were absolutely 1,000% right. So what I want you guys to hear is, in a relationship, that's what it is. And sometimes your partners are going to see things that you don't see, and vice versa. In that moment, before you start to fight, if you don't agree with it, just take a moment to be present. Just think about, what are they really trying to do? Because if you're in a relationship with that person, I would think they have your best interest at heart.
Right. Like, presumably they're saying it because they think it's going to help.
So when we look at it through that filter, like, once I calmed down on Sunday, the wine was out of my system. that didn't help. The wine didn't help. So the wine was out of my system. I was like, oh, man, I know what she was saying. You were absolutely right. And for us, it's hard to admit that shit. Like, I'll be honest. But I've learned that if you're going to be in a healthy relationship, you have to admit when you're wrong. You know what I mean? And so I was wrong. I should have listened. I should have addressed it, like you were telling me to do. Like I said, I make my own decisions. It's not like that, but I do take into consideration anything that you tell me, because I mean, since we've been together 2.5 years, you've been right on pretty much most of them, or all of them.
And
I
same
can't think
for
of anything where you've led me wrong, really. And so,
same
by
for you.
doing that, guys, in a relationship, it creates the trust, and it just gets better and better and better, and that translates into the relationship. That translates into your intimacy. It just, when you can trust someone, like, that's what that was. Is I trust that you're looking out for me. It's right. Like, I didn't like it, but because I trust you, I'm like, damn, she's right. I don't want to hear this shit, but damn, she's right. And so, yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's so true that I'm pointing out what I'm seeing, but it can be dealt with any number of ways. So I think if a masculine's having a hard time, just be like, can you listen for the problem and for an understanding of the problem? Because it may be true, and I was actually saying this at the time, I was like, I may not understand your perspective on this enough to recommend solutions. And that's where we got into a bit of a thing, because you're like, what do you think I should do? What do you think? And I was like, I ain't trying to really that's not my point. I'm just alerting you to, like, hey, over here, there's some shit that you might not want to wait for to pop out fully,
Very true.
It might not be fun to wait for that.
And she was right.
And so, you know, it's a valid point on listening for that kind of thing. I think that you also bring up something really, really crucially important is the role of being an oracle or bringing up that awareness is not actually an easy job. And one thing that you did really, really well was by the time we talked on Sunday and you had kind of been like, oh, you know, yeah, this is a thing to look at. I think by the time we got there, you had appreciated the oracle just from your own like values. Like you actually, I know you appreciate that in me, and you had like thought about it, because by the time we came to that conversation, it was really easy to resolve it and think, because really I just needed to share what I hadn't liked or like what made me feel not as seen as for being my oracle, because I'm like, well, gosh, I don't want to say it either, but I am trying to help. Like it's hard for, it's always true. I will just say for the oracles listening, like the whole deal with the oracle is that for people, the thing that is going to move the needle for them and the thing that's holding them back is almost universally the shit they don't want to look at. Because when you really stop and think about it, of course it's the shit they don't want to stop and think about. Because if they wanted to stop and think about it, they would have already. You wouldn't be pointing out that thing.
Right.
It wouldn't be resistance to it.
And when you're in a relationship with someone that wants to grow. So, again, growth hurts.
It does
right?
sometimes.
If you go to the gym, you want to get stronger. It's not sexy. If you want to run in a marathon, you got to go run. That doesn't feel good, right? Mm-hmm. So what we're talking about is a growing, healthy relationship, and so we want to grow. So when you're telling me something, I'm looking at it through that vein, like, damn, she right, because the uncomfortable stuff is what helps you level up.
Absolutely. Yeah, so oracleness is, and I actually feel the same way in my business too. It's like I'm the truth teller for people. And for that, I think that's where if we haven't done our own work and don't have enough internal support and resources within us to stand that path, it makes it difficult to walk and be the oracle for somebody. So if you need help with that, check out the links in the show notes, because you can always hop on our schedules. But like the whole, it is true. This is always going to come up, because if you do have a healthy relationship where you give a shit, whoever the oracle is always going to bring up the stuff that the whole relationship don't want to look at. And then your response to that is going to determine whether it succeeds or fails.
And in reality, that's what we have you for, is to help us look out for things that we don't see. So if you're constantly criticizing your oracle and shutting her down, you're going to lose an important piece of information you need to grow. Because a lot of people, we want to blow our businesses up. We want to do all these things. We want somebody we want to build with. But how many times are we shutting down the person that we're supposed to be building with?
I saw another, I think it was a TikTok, but it was a man being interviewed. He was interviewed because he owns a $300 million company. And they were asking him and interviewing about how he went broke earlier in his life. And his response to that, I think I don't think I've shown it to you yet though. His response was, he said, he's been married to the same woman the whole time. And he said before, she's always had these inklings. And he said, they never made sense to me. And it only made sense to me when I went broke. And he said, that was when I stopped and I asked, she's telling me stuff about this leading up to it, and she's not even leaving now that we're bankrupt. And that's when he was like, I really have to look at, like, what if she really is here to actually help me build this shit? And he started listening to the inkling and stuff like that. And then he was like, that's why you're interviewing me for a $300 million company right now. And
that's a good story.
It really is, because it shows how much the feminine needs the masculine and the masculine needs the feminine. We just can't do it. So just be nice. Like be nice along the way. Like, exactly. Like, how can you show love if you're going to choose to be with that person? And, I think we kind of talked about the end where the feminine really starts to think and bring that awareness and have decision making and essentially begin to be led by her own masculine, which is necessary for a woman to break up, because who's going to take over when she's broken up is her own masculine. Unless she goes back to like her dad's house or wherever, it's her masculine picking up the slack. So ultimately, that process is very, very necessary if you are deciding to break up. But one thing that, this is just my opinion, but I think part of the connectivity of the feminine brain is what makes us take so long to actually break up. Like we have to argue with ourselves so much about like, you know, whether it's valid and whether we really feel that way, and what are we just like in a mood, and should we be more reasonable, and like it took me like years to really even think through divorce and stuff like that. I would say the thing that you can do to help is start conversations if you are wondering what is going on within your feminine, or if you're having relationship problems, because the more that you bring things up and give her a space to share some of the stuff and really be listening, you don't have to break up for that to work.
That's true.
It's still so salvageable, because that's why I honestly think women take long to break up, is because all that time is eligible for saving it. Yeah. So if a masculine can just, you don't have to do it perfect. You don't have to know exactly what you're doing. But if you just go start talking and listening for like, what's the message trying to be delivered here? How can I show love even when it like, ooh, that what she said hurts, but can I still hold her hand while we're walking? That stuff is going to go a long way, because we are absolutely watching for it. And one of the comments we liked of the with the hand on the thigh while you're driving, it said, one of the women commented and said, don't hurt my feelings when you already hurt my feelings already. Just put your hand on my thigh and mind your business. And we were both laughing about that, but it got like 20,000 likes on the comment, because I think it was so true of like with that awareness, the feminine is paying attention to everything. So it really, every single gesture towards us that you do will help save the argument, save the relationship, ultimately, like all of that, because that's what the leadership looks like. We are, even if we don't act like we notice, we're noticing. So just if you want it, go get, like, literally go get her, like, and like literally go do the shit, because if you just pause and say, oh, maybe she doesn't want me, maybe whatever, it just runs the highest risk of actually going to a breakup, and really the relationship will fall apart.
Absolutely. All right, so we kind of got into that one already. We want to talk about, just wrapping up the show, what are some practical ways that you can stay loving while you're mad? So you kind of alluded to the first point already about holding hands.
We are big fans of this. This is a hill I'll die on. If you're on YouTube watching the video, we're doing it now. We almost always do. And we intentionally hold hands when our arguments get to the point where we're like at an impasse and we don't know what to say. That is the thing that we pull out of our pocket, guys. We are not joking about that.
Now, we both looking straight.
We're both acting all pissy.
But we holding hands.
But we're holding hands because I think it literally tells each of our brains that, yes, we're mad, but the actual choice is that we're going to be together.
Yeah.
So there ain't no, I'm not going to it's hard to pull shit when you're holding hands.
Very true. Because,
like, how am I going to get away from you? I'm really attached.
True story.
Yeah, the holding hands, I will really be on the hill. The opening the doors, like if you open
courteous. Second
being
point, be courteous. So I still open her doors. We talked about the bean bag. I'm still getting the bean bag during story time. She still pulled out the book. You went extra. Normally I get the chair. That's how I knew. I was like, she got the chair. Like, she even brought the chair, but that's a good thing. But again, those are cues in my mind saying that, hey, we're still together. We just in a impasse right now. But this is still communication too, guys. Just because you're not saying the words, the nonverbal communication sometimes is louder than the verbal communication. So these little things about getting the bean bag, all that's nonverbal communication, holding hands, that's nonverbal saying, hey, I'm still here. We just got an issue right now, but I'm still here.
And actually, that's a good point with the chair, because I used to get it, and then because I have neck pain, sometimes you were like, don't lift the thing, I'll carry it. So, I think, and I didn't even really think it through that way, but when I get the chair, I'm saying, I'm getting the chair for you over my neck, right? Like that is where the nonverbal communication, when you have a history, don't gloss over those things, because they really are actually valid.
Absolutely. Right? You're right. All right. The last one we have is don't take the emotions of your partner personal. Talk about that, babe.
Yeah.
Talk about me.
Okay. No, just kidding.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, I think that it's really easy to base your behavior off the other person's emotion. Right? Like, off the get-goes, we're like, I'm upset. And
so now I'm upset.
Right. Now I'm upset. Right.
And that's wrong, by the way. You got me upset.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
That was an immature me.
No, it's okay.
You upset now, you got me upset. Like, it should not be that way. But go ahead, babe.
No, it's okay. Right. And then if I'm like, well, but he's defensive. No, I'm defensive. Yeah. Right.
It's a bad deal.
It really, really is. Because, and that's why I like the accept the feeling, reject the behavior, right? You don't have to like certain behaviors. And that's where, when we talked Sunday night at the end, I was like, there's a couple things that I'm going to make requests from, but they were very easy because they're surface level things. They're not like you, it's not a personality thing. It was just like, this is how I like it. Like, could we do this instead? And it's no problem. And that's why I think it was so short.
Let's not gloss past that. If she asks for what she likes, that's not a problem for me to do it, because she's literally telling me what she likes. Hey,
Absolutely.
I'd rather you talk to me this way. That cuts down on the problems next time.
Absolutely. And I think it's an important thing. There's actually multiple things to be said about that. The feminine still sets boundaries. Like, there's, I think, this understanding where, because the feminine's submissive, that the masculine is setting all the boundaries. That's not at all what I think it looks like, is that the feminine absolutely sets boundaries, but they just sound different. So I think a masculine way of speaking is to be like, I don't like this, don't do it, which I personally find fine. I think a feminine way of setting boundaries is like, this is how this behavior made me feel, and this is what I will be doing when it happens again. I'm not sitting around Jay going, you need to talk to me like this. This is what you need to do. This is blah, blah. But I am allowed to say, this category thing, this is, I have determined as an adult, this is unacceptable for me, or whatever. Like, as in, the point I'm making is, you can speak very directly. This is unacceptable, but you don't have to go masculine just to make the point. You can always keep it feminine to say, this is the effect that it had. Here's why this effect is unacceptable to me, and here's what I'll be doing about it in the future. Yeah.
And that's okay. Like,
that's that what point. Being an adult looks like.
Exactly.
You're courteous, you're respectful, you're not, but you are an adult, and if you don't like something and you don't like the treatment, you get to leave or not be accepting it or whatever. So, see where you are with that, because I think sometimes we have a problem with both, and sometimes it's more like we overshoot the boundaries because the softness of the femininity, we think it has to be hard for it to be effective. I don't think that's true, but I think the flip side is sometimes we're like pussyfooting around it of, oh, well, this made me upset. I mean, just say, I don't like this, and it made me cry, and I won't be doing that anymore, right? Like,
certain things you need to be direct on.
There's certain communication, like, if you are sure that is, like, some things, if you, when you were single, decided that there's certain things that you will not be treated like, that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about, right? Like, there's no reason to necessarily modify that just because you're in a relationship now. Like, some things you can decide to modify and be like, they used to be important to me, not a thing now. But if you were like, this is how I deserve to be treated, that's where I think we get a little bit into trouble when we make too many allowances for treatment that's not for us, right? And that's where the feminine can be just as boundary heavy. And what I mean by like, she can still set the things that she needs. It just looks a little different because the masculine can change the relationship. For the feminine, it's really she can influence it or she can leave. So that's why it looks like that. But you know, the decision making that goes into it is the same.
Yeah. So, anything else?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, we just wanted to come on today. This was a real episode for us. This shit really happened this weekend. But I mean, as y'all can tell, we're back loving. We were like that yesterday. So it doesn't. Well, let me not say that. It is hard to have a healthy relationship because in those moments, it was hard for both of us. But what we're trying to do is give you guys resources that you can use in those moments to help it get easier down the road. And one of the things that we pride ourselves on is our time of tension gets shorter and shorter and shorter. That's one of the things we're like, let's resolve this now because that leaves more time for us to love on each other. And so having a healthy relationship is not easy at all times, but I feel like it's worth it, which is why we're doing what
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I will make the argument that even though it's not, like it looks messier to have a healthy relationship sometimes because you're putting things out on the table. And especially if you've had an unhealthy one and you're staying with it and you're unpacking it all to make it healthy, you know, that part can be kind of rough. But I will counter to say that it is actually so much better than the slow, painful, second by second death of the relationship. To watch that progress bar go from 100% to 0 and then you break up. We both done that and it fucking sucks. Yeah. Like there is no redeeming qualities or aspects to that process at all. No. Honestly, you are better off just having the conversations, blowing it up and not hurting each other further. But I always compare it to that. I really do. And I make it very real for myself because that's the alternative. Jay and I can sit here and go 10 rounds of round and round and round about our wounding and then resolve it. And that will still be a million times better than that slow fucking painful bleed out thing that I did before. Absolutely. So if you haven't been in it, you can take my word for it. If you have, you can remember your own experience and remind yourself accordingly. But since that shit sucks, highly recommend doing it this way.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what this podcast is about. We're just taking our experiences and we want to help you guys have better relationships. And so we're not advocating for you to split up from your partner. We are advocating for a healthy relationship is what we're advocating for. We just found this work through us splitting up from our partners. Yeah. But we want to put positivity in the world as far as relationships. There's so much negativity out there about you can't find a good partner, you can't have a good relationship, or we were married and married people talking about how bad their partners are behind their back. We don't want to do that here. We want to help put healthy relationship information in the world. That way we can help the world be a better place. So,
all right. Thanks so much for joining us. Check out the show notes for links to hop on the schedule to chat with us. You can also submit questions over at support@rocksandOceanspodcast.com because we would love, love, love to answer whatever you all have going on in your real lives. Thanks for listening to the Rocks and Oceans podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend that could use this information. Please also subscribe and leave us a review so that more people can find this work. You can also find us over at YouTube and TikTok at Rocks and Oceans Podcast. Let's build a happier and more powerful world together.